Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and we're continuing with our nature, number, and geometry lessons today. We're going to be doing lesson number 8, which is again working with six-fold symmetry in order to create a snowflake. So we are using our live education Waldorf curriculum. For this lesson, I am also using our Waldorf main lesson books. You can find these at a child stream. I like these because the pages are nice and big. They are separated by an onion skin. On occasion, we use this as part of our lesson. Sometimes we remove them, sometimes we leave them in. Sometimes I like to see the double page spread without the onion skin. Our previous lesson was working with six-fold symmetry with the hexagon. Today we're going to be working again with six-fold symmetry, but we're going to be looking at snowflakes. So to begin this, we're going to need our compass, and the instructions say to start with a radius of at least 2 inches. So I'm going to grab my ruler, I'm going to measure this. We're going to do our concentric circles so that we can create our snowflake. I'm going to begin by measuring my radius to 4 inches rather than 2 inches. This ends up being a mistake, not because it's too big, only because it's too difficult to do this with such a large radius. So it makes my diameter about 8 inches, which works well for my page, which is 9.5 inches by 12 inches. Then I'm going to make my 6 divisions of a circle by placing my compass on the circumference and then swinging the arc so that it intersects on either side. Then I can use that as my starting point for my compass once again and swing the arc until I get 6 divisions of a circle. Went ahead and I labeled them, and now that I have my 6 points, I can use my ruler in order to connect the opposing points so that they all go through the center, and this way we can get our 6-pointed snowflake. Then once all of the points are connected, we want to readjust our compass. And so we started out with 4 inches. Now I'm going to go down to 3 inches. And now I'm going to make the concentric circles within it. It would be a lot easier to start with 2 or even 2.5 inches and then make your increments about 0.75 inches smaller. In this case, I'm just doing 1 inch smaller, so starting at 4, 3, 2, and finally 1. And now I can begin the design of our snowflake. So I start out with my ruler to make a tiny hexagon right in the center. I am referring to a couple of different inspiration images, but because I was going back and forth between multiple images, it actually doesn't work very well in the end. And I'm not going to realize how poorly this snowflake looks until I've already invested a lot of time. And I think that I can salvage it, but by the end of it, it looks terrible. And I'm going to show you the entire process, and then I'm going to show you what I did in order to fix it, and that's basically to do an entire new one. I flip the pages back in the main lesson book, and I find an onion skin in between 2 other lessons, and I use that page just so that I didn't use another full page in case we need more of these pages for other lessons that are coming up. So whatever you do on one side, you need to do 5 more times so that all 6 points are the same, because that is the point of doing a snowflake. Now there is one other thing that you could do to make this process potentially easier, and that's to do the project where you take a circle, a piece of paper that's already cut as a circle, and you fold it in half and in half, or rather in half and then in thirds, so that you can end up with 6 folds. Then you cut it out in order to make a snowflake. By cutting different portions out and then you reveal the snowflake, it can give you some inspiration on how to draw the snowflake into your main lesson book. You can also look at inspiration pictures of snowflakes. You'll find that each one, of course, is unique, but there are some elements that repeat themselves from one snowflake to another. 2 of the main images that you will see repeated are a full hexagon shape where it almost looks like the entire snowflake is enclosed within a hexagon. And then the other image is where you see very distinct snowflakes with each of the 6 rays of the snowflake having a very specific design, usually with arms that radiate out versus them all being contained into one hexagon. In doing this first snowflake, I thought that I could sort of put those two ideas together, and it ends up not looking great at all. There's a lot of detail that I freehanded, and because it was such a large snowflake, the freehand details really look messy. And if you're going to do a snowflake that's this large, then I would recommend using your straight edge so that you can get those parts and those details of the snowflake a little bit better. But that would be a very tedious and long process. And so doing a smaller snowflake design, as the main lesson book suggests, at about 2 to 2.5 inches in radius, is a lot easier to freehand those different intricate details, because you can make a straight line a lot easier if it's short versus if it's long. So after I did the majority of the snowflake within the hexagon, I thought that I would add some arms or some rays out on those 6 points, and I'm doing something where the very tip of that ray is a hexagon in itself, and then adding more lines within the hexagon just to give it some detail and dimension. In the end, they look like little people on each of those 6 points of the snowflake, so I really didn't like it, and I didn't think that it was suitable for my daughter to copy for 2 reasons. 1, it didn't really look like a snowflake by the time I'm done, and 2, the amount of detail I thought wasn't going to be helpful for my daughter. It was going to be too tedious. And so I did this again by making a much smaller circle, and then followed the same process of my 6th division of a circle and connecting those lines, and then readjusting my compass so that it's about 3/4 of an inch smaller. And then again, I did one more towards the center, which was too tight to keep them all the same distance apart. So if you look carefully, they're not quite the same equal distance for each of those concentric circles. But in the end, it doesn't matter so much, because I tried to erase some of those circles anyway so that the snowflake can really take center stage. This time around, I did start with the hexagon in the center once again, but then I did radiating triangles out from that center rather than triangles around each point as I previously did in the other snowflake. This is turning out a lot better. The smaller scale was so much easier, and I could freehand a lot of those details. Then as I got to the outside of the hexagon, I ended up doing little arrows in a sense, and I copied this from the main lesson book, and I really like this detail because it finally looks a lot more like what you would expect a snowflake to look like. And one tip is to outline everything once you're done so that the snowflake really pops against the circle that you begin with, and also draw your circle really light so that your actual snowflake can really pop. And then as you do your details, go in with them to outline and to do interior lines around all of them, because that little detail adds a lot to the final image and it makes it look a lot more snowflake-like in the end. So I'm adding just a couple of details, and really at this point, more details I think would take it to be too unrealistic. And so I'm going to stop at this point, even though I'm really tempted to go on, but I end up erasing that last little triangle that I'm about to do and any of the extra lines, and I'm really pleased with the way the second one turned out. Now, you don't always have to do your lessons again, but sometimes it is worth it. I hope that you enjoyed this geometry lesson. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video for more information, as well as links to all of the resources that we use, as well as extra tutorials and videos. You can find that link down in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.